When Kodak purchased Nagel Camerawerks in 1932, it purchased a well-established camera maker in Germany. The real reason that Kodak was interested in Nagel Camerawerks wasn't for its folding cameras. Its intent was really to have August Nagel, perhaps that's pronounced August because he was German, to produce a 35mm camera in response to the popularity of the Leica and, to a lesser degree, the Zeiss Icon Contax. But we're not going to discuss the Retina today. Instead, we are going to look at this camera. Why this camera? This is part of the Vollenda series. The Vollenda series actually encompassed 5 cameras, but I only own 3 of them, and one of them was a 616 camera, again reflecting Kodak's slavish devotion to creating alternatives to already popular film formats. So let's get these off the table and focus on this camera right here. Real quickly, this is the Vollenda Type 47 taking 127 film, giving you photos that are 3 centimeters by 4 centimeters. This camera was covered as part of an earlier series on so-called baby cameras. The Vollenda 620 is a camera that gives you 6 by 9 photos and is fairly representative of what was available in that era, which would be the 1930s to 1940s. This camera would compete with other 6 by 9 cameras from a number of German, French, and also Kodak's own cameras. And as indicated in the back with a very nice script, this was the Vollenda 620. 620, of course, referring to the fact that it used 620 film. Keep in mind that Kodak also produced this camera coming out of the Nagel Camerawerks. This is the very popular Kodak Duo 620. There also was a rangefinder equipped version, and today that camera sells for quite a few dollars. I really wanted to look at this camera. This camera is the lesser known Vollenda, also called the Vollenda 620. Obviously, this is not a 6 by 9 camera. This, in fact, shoots 6 by 6 square format. And you can tell because here's the viewfinder, and you can see that square. The Vollenda 620 6 by 6 model was only produced in 1940 and 1941. It's fairly uncommon. When you search for Vollenda 620, you'll often see the 6 by 9 camera. So this one's a bit unusual. Probably not rare, but still uncommon. So this is the Vollenda 620, and as you can see, it has that same type of script. It has that same type of script here on the back of the camera, Vollenda 620. 620, of course, refers to the film format using 620 film. 620 film is identical in dimensions to 120 film, with the difference being the 620 film spool is much thinner. 620 cameras cannot take 120 film because the film spool is just fatter at the ends and physically won't fit into the camera. When folded, this makes for a very compact package. This has a slight resemblance to some of the Retina cameras, particularly in the use of chrome and how the lens door is sort of squared off right here. Top deck looks slightly, vaguely similar. Some of the early Kodak Retinas had this satin chrome finish here as well. Could have been intentional, we'll never know. It certainly would make sense because it then ties in this particular design in with the other Kodaks that Nagel Camerawerks was producing at the time. This was referred to as a self-erecting folder, but I don't really believe that to be the case. So when you press this button, the lens door does snap open, but it doesn't fully lock into place. You then have to press down, and now it's locked into place. It also does not raise the viewfinder. You have to do that manually. This would be a reverse Galilean viewfinder. That is, it has elements in it. And I say reverse Galilean because this would actually sort of widen the view. If you ever pick up a camera that has a Galilean viewfinder and look through it from the front to back, you'll see that it is a slightly enlarged image. All right, enough of that. Obviously, this is a folding camera. Leather bellows. I believe this is like a cardboard material underneath. Folded cardboard. It's interesting that despite the age of these cameras, in general, you'll find that the bellows have held up pretty well, particularly with the leather-covered bellows. One thing I do when I get these cameras and they have leather bellows is I carefully clean them with some saddle soap, and then I apply some shoe polish. Because it is leather, the shoe polish actually adds some nourishment or some moisture to it. Not enough moisture to cause mold, but enough moisture to make these a bit more pliable. When we look around this camera, this uses a Kodak and a stigmat lens. I don't know if this is a 3-element or a 4-element design, and it's always difficult to tell with Kodak because Kodak would apply a lens name without any regard to the actual design of the lens. For example, the Ektar name appears on many, many, many lenses, from early Kodak Retinas right up through cheapy point and shoots on up to the Instamatic era, and a bit beyond that. So for Kodak, Ektar was simply a brand and not representative of the lens design. This is a front self-focusing lens. That means that when you focus a lens, the front cell rotates away from the rest of away from the body of the lens. A unit focusing design is one in which the entire lens moves either toward or away from the film plane. In theory, a unifocusing design is superior to a front cell focusing design. In practice, both are going to work very well. And once you get down to your smaller apertures, it's probably not going to make that big of a difference. This uses a computer shutter with speeds running from 1/500th. Is it 1/500? No, in this case it was 1/300th of a second down to 1 second plus speed. So this did have slow speeds. Your aperture control is a small little protruded tab under the lens that you would then slide back and forth to your desired aperture. The aperture scale for this lens is right along top. As you can see, the numbers have mostly worn away. I think I might try to fill them with some whites, make them visible again. Up on the top deck, it's pretty clean. You have your viewfinder, you have your film advance knob, you have your shutter release, and this small socket is for using a threaded cable release. This is your lens door release button, and of course, as we mentioned, this is your folding viewfinder. This simply is the top of the post that holds the film in place. With roll film, you never rewind the film. You simply continue to advance the film until that paper leader, the ending leader, I guess you should even call it the ending lead. I guess you should call it a leader because it's not a leader. But the end of the film simply pulls away from your fresh roll film, and you just continue to rotate it until you hear flap, 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 and then you know that you've completely rolled your. Then you know you've completed the cycle as far as advancing the film. On the back, you have this small window, and this window is to help you align the number for your next shot. The number would, of course, appear in the red window. You probably want to center the frame number within this red window. And then for subsequent shots, do the same thing. That would help avoid overlapping frames. This would be when you reach the end of the film, 0, and then this switch you use for after you've taken your photo. So the idea is this camera supposedly does have double exposure prevention. You would take your photo, then you wouldn't be able to press on the release. Then you would advance to your next shot, at which point it should auto stop at the next one. I used this camera a long time ago, and I can't really remember exactly how it works. I believe that was the intent. Let's open up the back of the camera. This is not a lock for the back. It's simply a way for you to pull the back open. Instead, underneath this little leather handle, there's a small tab, and this is very common with a lot of cameras. Small tab that you lift from the bottom, not the top, as I just tried to do. Then you can pull the camera open. As you can see, I have some film in here. You know, I have tons of 120 film spools, except when I want one. And that seems to be how things go at times. Anyway, with a traditional 120 film spool, it actually is much fatter, and the ends here are also much fatter, and that's why you can't use this. See this small little post here? That goes inside here. On a 120 film spool, it's much fatter, which it really isn't a problem. but it's really the circumference or the diameter of the end caps for your film. And that's what makes you unable to use 120 film. And that's why you also, with most cameras, you cannot use 620 film in a 120 camera. Looks like I shot some film, and it also looks like I should process that soon. Here's a little advertisement for Kodak film, and you can see it had various types of films. In here, you can see the inside of the bellows, also the rear element of the lens, and here's little rollers. I believe this helped you auto space for your next shot. Yes. I don't know if this is still working on this camera. Here's your film rails and your pressure plate. The role of the pressure plate, of course, is to keep the film flat against these film rails so that when you take your photo, you get as sharp an image as possible. Always dependent upon the taking lens being of sufficient quality to record a sharp image or to take your photograph. On the bottom of the camera, these are just these little decorative caps for your film spool, or your film spindles, I guess. And here is a tripod socket, and it is in alignment with the center of the lens. Like other cameras, this has a small leather handle. It's not uncommon for you to see that this handle is missing. Because it is made of leather, I don't know that I would trust it 80 years after the fact. And so I probably would not use this to carry the camera. And in fact, I've never used the leather handle on any of these cameras to transport it or just carry it around while I'm taking photographs. And I certainly would suggest that you not use it either. This is a fairly simple camera to use, and I think what helps it is the presence of this top-mounted shutter release. It falls pretty naturally where you expect it to be, and making it easy to take a photograph. I do have some 620 cameras that on which it's on the left side, or actually, or might even be positioned a bit differently. I've found this camera fairly simple to use. Obviously, I shot with it once, and I probably should process that film. I believe I shot that on June 20th, which is 6/20, which is 6/20, which was known as 620 Day, and that was a day in which you got out your 620 camera and went out and took some photos with that. Like many folding cameras, it folds up into a very compact package, making it very simple to slip into your bag or your pocket, or your backpack or purse if you carry one. When I received this camera, it didn't work. I couldn't release the shutter. And so I had to open the shutter, and what I found is that that part of the shutter release arm was broken. I ended up repairing it by using some silver solder and soldering a small blob, not a small blob, but but by adding some solder to the end of that arm, and then using a small file to reshape the end into a small circular pattern to fit into the part of the shutter release. And I use silver solder because that's going to be the most durable. I did that probably, oh gosh, I probably did that about 15 years ago, and it's worked since. So I'm going to process these photos. I probably won't have them processed in time for this video. Plus, even after I process the film, I still have the problem of getting my scanner up and running. And my scanner runs on Windows 98 and XP, but is no longer supported by Microsoft Windows, so I have to figure out a way to get around that. So once I get that scanner up and running, we'll get some photos, and maybe I'll post them at a later time. The construction of this camera is very sturdy. What's nice is when it opens, it really stays open. To collapse the lens, you can see this small little lever here. Simply press down, and snaps closed. Once again, it doesn't lock it into place. You then just use your finger to press down on that lever until it does close, or you can just pull it open here. This actually is sort of similar to how a lot of cameras did it, which is there's this hinged pivot point, and then you can see how this piece rotates. As with all the cameras I received, this got a thorough cleaning, and I was able to restore the leather to, I think, a fairly nice luster. I also cleaned the top deck. I believe I removed this and cleaned some of the mechanicals inside. And of course, I removed all the lens elements and cleaned them. You can see a slight tint, ever so slight green tint to this lens. This is an uncoated lens, being from 1940 or 41. That slight green tint would be a natural process that occurs. Often it's referred to as blooming, and it's almost like a natural coating. Keep in mind this still is an uncoated lens, so I show reasonable caution I don't overclean the lens. Let's look at the weight of this camera. This camera without film weighs 1 pound 1.9 ounces, or we could say 1 pound 2 ounces. How about the camera that's most close in size to it? That would be the Duo 620. So the Duo 620 weighs 1 pound 3.3 ounces. The other Vollenda, the 6x9 model, weighs 1 pound 6 ounces. And so considerably more, 4 ounces more, which is what, a quarter pound. How about the little baby Vollenda, the one that takes 127 film? That one weighs 12.5 ounces. So that one comes in less than 1 pound. Well, there's not much else to say about this camera other than if you're a fan of folding cameras, this is a very easy camera to use. You're still faced with the challenge of respooling 120 film onto a 620 spool, which means you'll need at least 2 spools. Hopefully your camera comes with at least with one, and then there are plenty out there on the open market or on the used market. And there are plenty of videos that explain how to respool 120 film onto a 620 spool. Probably takes about 10 minutes. Does take some time and some patience. So my final rating for the Kodak Vollenda 620, the 6x6 model, is 9.0. I think it does everything pretty well. The only downside, of course, is going to be the use of 620 film. But otherwise, it has a very reliable shutter once serviced. The body itself seems to be made of very good materials, and it's a sturdy camera. Overall, I think it's held up. This camera is now 80 plus years old and looks pretty good. Probably doesn't look all that different aside from loss of paint here and there, but it doesn't look all that different from the day it was sold. And for those who collect Kodak's German cameras, this is one camera that you ought to consider. These don't come up that often for sale, so it can't really give you an estimate on price. Currently, folding cameras are not really in favor, so it shouldn't be that much once it arrives on the market. But that's today, and you don't know what's going to happen a year from now or 6 months from now. That brings us to the end of this video. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like or subscribe. If you have any comments or if you have any suggestions on any cameras you'd like to see me look at in the future, let me know in the comments below, or you can send me an email at contact@camera-talk.net. You can also click on that icon in the lower right corner of the screen for more content about cameras and photography. And I'll see you on the next video.